A 14-foot shark had been silently drifting beneath every ocean on Earth for millions of years, and we had absolutely no idea it was there. That is the part that should unsettle you. The ocean, in waters humans had been sailing for centuries, was quietly hiding an animal large enough to swallow a person whole, and it took a Navy parachute tangled at 500 feet to finally drag the secret into daylight. On the 15th of November, 1976, a United States Navy research vessel called the AFB-14 was working roughly 25 miles northeast of the Hawaiian island of Oahu. The crew was using a pair of large sea anchors, essentially heavy canvas parachutes, streamed behind the ship to hold a stable position in deep water. At some point during the operation, one of the parachutes stopped behaving like a parachute. Something was fighting it. When the crew finally winched the drogue up, they found the reason. Tangled in the canvas, at roughly 500 feet, was a shark unlike anything in any reference book on the ship. It measured about 14.5 feet long. It weighed close to 1,700 pounds. Its mouth was enormous, soft, and rubbery, edged with hundreds of tiny hooked teeth, and its lips seemed almost luminous. There was no entry in the standard classifications that matched it. The captain, to his lasting credit, did not throw it back. He preserved the carcass and delivered it to marine biologists on shore. It turned out to be an entirely new species, and it was strange enough that scientists had to build a new genus and a new family to hold it. Today it is called Megachasma pelagios, Megachasma pelagios, the megamouth shark. In the roughly 50 years since that accidental catch, fewer than 300 individuals have ever been recorded worldwide, most of them washed up dead or netted by chance. It filters plankton in slow, quiet drifts through the deep midwater, and for the entire time humans had been sailing above it, we had no idea it was there. That is the important detail. Not that a monster was caught, that the ocean, casually, produced a 14-foot animal we had never seen, in waters we thought we understood, and it took a parachute to reveal it. Which brings us to the second story, and to a much older question. In July of 1969, a United States Navy submersible called Alvin was working over the tongue of the ocean, a deep trench that cuts into the shallow Bahamas bank like a wound. Alvin was, and still is, a real workhorse of American oceanography, a small 3-person sphere strapped inside a larger frame. The pilots on this particular dive were experienced Navy men. Their assignment was routine. Follow a cable spanning the trench, check the hardware, come home. They were about 5,000 feet down. According to the pilot's later written account, something along the cable was moving that shouldn't have been. At first, he thought the sub itself was drifting. Then he realized the sub was steady, and the shape outside was the one in motion. He described a thick body, 4 flippers, a long neck, and a small head with 2 eyes that turned toward the viewport. He said it moved deliberately, then accelerated away, faster than Alvin could pivot to photograph it. The onboard cameras were preset for close range. By the time the pilot reacted, the animal was outside their working distance. Now, here is where honesty matters more than drama. There is no photograph. There is no second submersible that confirms the sighting. The pilot's own account is what we have, and he reported that when he wrote it into the log, the entry did not survive into the final records. He believed it was removed. He also insisted, across hundreds of subsequent dives, that he never saw the animal again and did not care whether anyone believed him. What was it? The honest answer is we do not know. The description matches a plesiosaur, the long-necked marine reptile that the fossil record says died out at the end of the Cretaceous, 66 million years ago. It also matches, in vaguer terms, a very large, unfamiliar shark or a trick of low light on a slow-moving column of water. What is certain is that the tongue of the ocean is one of the least surveyed deep basins in the Western Atlantic, and that the man in the sphere was a trained submariner, not a tourist. He carried the story to the end of his career. The record carried the silence. The third recovery is smaller and stranger, and it happened on a beach. On the morning of the 11th of October 2012, A man named Gino Cavacci was walking the sand at Pompano Beach, Florida, a little north of Fort Lauderdale. He was not looking for anything. He noticed a blue sphere in the wet sand near the tide line, larger than a golf ball, smaller than a grapefruit, roughly the size of a softball. He crouched. He picked it up. It was cold. It was firm. It had a lens. He was holding an eyeball. Cavacci wrapped it in a plastic bag of ice and walked it to authorities. The find went to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and from there to their research institute in St. Petersburg. Wire Services picked up the photograph, and it spent about 72 hours as the strangest image on the internet. People suggested a giant squid, a colossal squid, something unknown. The lab was more patient. They examined the tissue, measured the structure of the sclera, checked the bone that surrounded the socket, and identified the animal within days. It was a swordfish, a very large one. The eye had been removed with clean cuts consistent with a fisherman's knife, and the head, or the whole fish, had been dumped at sea, most likely after processing. The tide had done the rest. A swordfish eye is astonishingly large because a swordfish hunts in deep, dim water and needs enormous light-gathering surfaces to see anything at all. When one washes up whole on a sunny Florida beach, it looks like a message from somewhere much darker than a fishing dock. That is really the shape of this whole subject. Most of the disturbing things pulled from the sea are not monsters. They are ordinary parts of a world we do not visit, arriving in a world we do. The fourth recovery is one of those parts, and it is alive. If you have never seen a hagfish, the easiest way to describe it is a length of pale gray rope with a mouth. Hagfish are among the oldest surviving vertebrate lineages on Earth. Fossils very similar to the modern animal appear in rocks more than 300 million years old, which means their basic design predates trees. They have no jaws. They have no true eyes in the sense a fish or a person would recognize. They have a raspy tongue plate lined with keratin hooks, and they use it to bore into carcasses on the seafloor and eat outward from the inside. They are also chemical factories. Along each flank, a hagfish carries roughly 100 slime glands, and when it is grabbed, bitten, or startled, it releases a small amount of protein and mucin thread into the surrounding water. That thread unspools on contact with seawater into a mesh so fine and so vast that a single palm-sized hagfish can convert a bucket of water into a single sheet of gel in seconds. In 2017, a truck carrying live hagfish overturned on a highway in Oregon, and the entire road had to be closed while crews shoveled slime. Every deep trawler in the North Pacific and the North Atlantic knows the animal. They come up in nets. They come up in traps. They come up looped in knots because a hagfish can tie its own body into a moving overhand and slide the knot down its length to scrape slime off its skin or to pry a mouthful loose from a corpse. The reason to include the hagfish in a list of disturbing recoveries is not that it is dangerous, because it is not. It is that when a trawl comes up and one of these is inside it, you are looking at a working animal from a version of Earth that has otherwise vanished. The fifth story is the one that made the whole world briefly nervous about a coastline. Beginning in August of 2007, human feet started washing ashore in the Salish Sea, the ribbon of water between the coast of British Columbia in Canada and the state of Washington in the northwestern United States. The first was found by a young girl on Jedediah Island. It was a right foot inside a running shoe with the sock still on. 2 weeks later, on a different island, a second right foot appeared, also inside a sneaker. Then another, then another. Over the years that followed, more than 20 separate feet came ashore around the Salish Sea, most of them right feet, most of them inside modern athletic shoes. The rumor mill did what rumor mills do. There was talk of a serial killer, talk of organ trafficking, talk of a downed plane. The reality, worked out patiently by the British Columbia Coroner's Service and by forensic anthropologists at Simon Fraser University, is more mundane and, in its own way, sadder. When a body enters cool marine water and is not recovered, the soft tissue at the joints breaks down first. Ankles are among the weakest attachment points in the human skeleton. Once the ankle gives, the shoe, which in modern designs is essentially a sealed foam pod, floats. The rest of the body, denser, does not. Investigators traced the majority of the identified feet to missing persons whose disappearances were already on record. Most of them presumed drownings or suicides from bridges around the Vancouver and Seattle waterways. There is no killer. There is a current pattern, a shoe industry that started using more buoyant midsoles in the mid-2000s, and a stretch of cold, sheltered water that does not disperse what falls into it. That explanation closes the file, but it does not really close the feeling. Every so often, another one arrives. The coroner's office logs it, matches it if possible, and returns it to a family. The recovery is disturbing, precisely because it is ordinary. The sixth recovery is not an animal at all. It is a weapon. At about 6 in the morning, on the 15th of June, 2022, a commercial trawler, working roughly 3 miles off the coast of Block Island, Rhode Island, pulled up a rusted metal cylinder in its net. It was heavy, roughly 500 pounds, shaped like a small barrel. The crew recognized it immediately for what it was, because if you fish those waters long enough, someone has warned you. It was a depth charge, specifically a Mark 9, a design the United States Navy used in the Second World War to attack submerged German U-boats. The crew did the correct thing. They did not bring it aboard fully. They did not try to move it. They radioed the United States Coast Guard, who cordoned off the surrounding water and called in a Navy explosive ordnance disposal team from Naval Station Newport. The team confirmed that the charge still contained live explosive filler, around 260 pounds of TNT, and they towed it a safe distance offshore. The next morning, they detonated it underwater. Residents on Block Island reported hearing the concussion. The charge had been sitting on the bottom for roughly 8 decades. It had probably been dropped during the closing months of the war, when American surface ships were still hunting the last German submarines operating along the eastern seaboard. Most of those charges either exploded on the target or were rendered inert by seawater over time. This one did neither. It waited on the sea floor through the entire Cold War, through the moon landings, through the internet, until a net came for it. The North Sea, the Baltic, the English Channel, and the waters off Normandy still hold, by some estimates, more than 1 million tons of unexploded ordnance from the 2 world wars. Every year, dredgers and trawlers find pieces of it. Most are handled quietly. Occasionally the story surfaces. The recovery off Block Island was one of the loud ones. The 7th recovery is the one that reads most like a fable, and it is real, and it took place in the middle of the open ocean. In late February of 2016, a group of fishermen working off the southern coast of the Philippines noticed a small white yacht drifting without sails set, no dinghy in tow, no radio traffic, and no visible crew. They approached cautiously. The name on the hull, once they got close enough to read it, was Sayo. The boat was in poor condition. The rigging was salt scoured. The interior, when they boarded, was dim and dry. Inside the main cabin, seated at a small chart table, was the body of a man. He was dressed. His arm was extended toward a radio set. Because of the sealed environment, the salt in the air, and the steady heat of the tropics, his body had not decomposed in the usual way. It had desiccated. Local reporting described him as mummified, and photographs that later circulated showed a preserved figure that looked, from a distance, like a person still working. He was identified as Manfred Fritz Bajerat, a German long-distance sailor who had been living aboard the Sayo for years after the death of his wife. Investigators pieced together the last confirmed contacts. A friend had spoken with him at sea in early 2015. He had not been heard from since. The medical examination, though limited by the condition of the remains, concluded that he had most likely died of a heart attack while at the radio. The boat, unmanned, had drifted for months, perhaps longer, across the western Pacific until fishermen found it near the island of Mindanao. Mindanao. There is no supernatural element in this story. There is a man who chose the ocean as his home, died alone in the place he loved, and was returned to shore by strangers who happened to be looking for tuna. It is disturbing, not because it is monstrous, but because it is quiet. Most of what the sea gives back is quiet. That is worth staying with for a moment before the credits roll on all of this. The image most people carry of the deep ocean is inherited from posters, from movies, from the little inset drawings on old nautical charts where a curl of ink stands in for a serpent. The reality, based on what has actually come up in nets and grabs and submersible dives, is stranger than the posters and less theatrical. There are animals down there whose ancestors watched the continents rearrange, and they look the part. There are entire species we have met exactly once, by accident, because a research ship happened to trail a piece of canvas at the wrong depth. There are metal objects on the seafloor that were designed to kill people, who are all now dead of old age, and the objects are still capable of doing the job. And there are, at any given moment, small boats moving on the open water, carrying people who will not make it home, whose stories will end without an audience, and whose remains, if they are found at all, will be found by someone in rubber boots who is expecting fish. None of that requires a plesiosaur to be interesting. It is interesting because it is true, which is not to say the plesiosaur story is closed. The pilot who saw whatever he saw off the Bahamas in 1969 is on record. The tongue of the ocean is still, more than half a century later, poorly surveyed below a few thousand feet. Megamouth sharks existed for the entire span of human civilization before we noticed one. It is fair, and even honest, to say that the deep ocean is the last place on this planet where large surprises remain plausible, and to leave the door open a crack without walking through it. So here is where this leaves us. A parachute pulled up a new family of shark. A submersible pilot saw something he could not name and lost the paperwork. A softball-sized eye rolled up on a Florida beach and turned out to belong to a fish that lives where a person cannot. A jawless animal, older than trees, keeps arriving in nets in a bucket of its own slime. Feet in running shoes drift ashore because ankles are weak and foam floats. A depth charge from a war nobody alive remembers waited on the bottom until a trawler came for it. And a sailor at a radio drifted for months across the Pacific before anyone thought to look inside the cabin. The recoveries are not really the story. The story is that the sea is a slow archive, and it opens on its own schedule, and the people who happen to be nearby when a page turns are almost always ordinary. A fisherman, a pilot, a girl on a beach. If you want to know what else the archive is holding, the honest answer is that we do not know. About 80% of the ocean floor has never been mapped in any useful detail. Every serious deep-sea expedition of the last 20 years has come back with species that were not on the list when it left. The parachute keeps coming up heavy. Somewhere tonight, a net is being hauled onto a wet deck under a work light. Whatever is in it was not there yesterday, from the point of view of anyone who will ever see it. That is the whole idea. The deep does not hide things forever. It just decides when. The eye on the beach was the size of a softball. It was blue. It had been looking at nothing in particular for a very long time before it was picked up.